Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm continuing here now on page 611. This is the 12th program in our work on rules of magic for the physical plane. And we're in the 15th chapter. Yes, the 15th. And so we are nearing the end of the book. And this section that we're going to be dealing with now is about the negation of the great illusion. Maybe there are different ways of looking at this great illusion, and let's see if we can determine some of these. In one way, the whole universe is the great illusion, but I don't think that's what Master DK is meaning. Let us see. The phrase in Rule 15 which says that blend the fire and water has reference to the effect produced at the point of condensation after the great words bringing about that effect have been pronounced. Now, these words are not given to us, obviously, and he's explained why. This rule is almost incapable of explanation, and it is not permitted to me to give to you the words that effect this process. Only some hints may be given, which will serve to encourage the true aspirant to think, and may, alas, only irritate the casual thinker who seeks easy and quick methods and formulas through which to work. I think we see how very cautious the hierarchy is in these matters of precipitating thought forms. Okay, heat and moisture are present in the production of all forms of life, but the great mystery, and almost the final mystery to be explained to the adept, perhaps in that adept initiation, the fifth, is how the merging of three fires can produce moisture or the watery element. Well, sometimes, water has an interesting symbolism. Okay. Let's see. And almost the final mystery is how, can produce the watery element, because sometimes water simply means matter. This problem and this phenomenon constitute the basis of the great illusion to which the ancient books refer. Through the agency of the combination, the enveloping Maya is produced. I mean, we're not at the level of considering the universe as the great Mahamaya. We are thinking of a certain concealment or a distortion which occurs on much, much lower levels. So in the blending of the fire and water, let's see here. Okay. Heat and moisture are present in all forms of life. But how can the merging of the three fires produce the watery element? Okay. So that is the question that we are addressing ourselves to here. There is in reality no such thing as water. The watery sphere, the astral plane is, could you but realize it, an illusory effect and has no real existence. So it looks like water is water being equated with illusion. There does seem to be matter existing between the matter of the lower mental plane and the etheric matter, but water is here meant to be something differently understood. Okay, so there is in reality no such thing as water. The watery sphere, the astral plane, is, could you but realize it, an illusory effect and has no real existence. All of the phantasmagoria there found is considered in this sense illusory. Yet in time and space, and to the understanding of the witnessing consciousness, it is more real than that which it hides and conceals. So true reality is hidden by the water, by the witnessed watery sphere. I cannot make this clearer in words. It is only possible to suggest to the intelligent student that the light of his soul reflected in his mind and the energy of form as expressed in his etheric body are for him in the realm of a temporary duality, his two basic realities. So we're talking about soul, mind, brain, or at least mind, brain. The mind, brain duality without the astral plane considered in the usual descent, soul, mind, brain. Okay, well, he says he can't make this clear in words. We're going to do the best we can to maybe fathom a few things. The watery nature of his astral experience, in which these two aspects of divinity seem, again, illusion be it noted, to meet and work, is but a glamorous phenomenon, and in an occult sense is not based on fact. So both the etheric sphere and the mental sphere seem to meet within the astral area, and yet we have essentially an illusion there. So this illusory effect, the astral plane, the watery sphere, seems more real than that which it hides. So the light of the soul, let's just say, light of the soul reflected in the mind, and the etheric energy are two realities, a temporary duality, but two basic realities for the perceiver, and they seem to meet and to work on something called the astral plane. This is difficult to fathom because, as stated, if the Agnisurians drain off the matter of the astral plane, the magician will die. So there definitely has to be a gradual ascent of matter, ever less complex as we move from, let's say, the physical permanent atom on the highest etheric level to the mental plane, whereon the atomic material is simpler and less complex than is found on the etheric level, and it has to be met with continuity by matter on the astral level. So the material aspect apparently is there. But the phenomena, the phantasmagoria, the reflection of both the soul light reflected in the mind and the etheric energy, that reflection is illusory. It is phenomenal. It is a very real seeming illusion. It is part of our perceptual apparatus, and we have to deal with it, but sometimes it's called, as for instance in Agni Yoga, it's called the wilderness, and we are not to, after we drop the physical body, we are to move through the wilderness rapidly. It's all these various forms which have been made by man. Eventually, that area of matter, which presently supports a great illusion, will be a vehicle for the expression of the radiation of love. Well, I don't pretend to understand this completely. But let's see if we can piece together some degree of understanding. Any true aspirant knows that his spiritual progress can be gauged in terms of his freedom from this illusion and of his release into the clear air and pure light of spiritual consciousness. Now, that's when the term air is used. The Buddhic plane is suggested. So this statement suggests release into the Buddhic plane. In its consciousness, the animal kingdom works with the second of these two basic realities, for it is the life of the etheric body and the force which governs the animal or material nature are the prime expression of truth. And for it, the life of the etheric body and the force which governs the animal or material nature are the prime expression of truth. Yet the animal is beginning to sense dimly the world of illusion and possesses certain psychic powers and senses which recognize yet fail to interpret the astral plane. Well, the mind principle is missing. So interpretation is not possible, but recognition is possible. So animal sensing of the phenomena of the astral plane. The veil of illusion is beginning to fall before the eyes of the animal, but it knows it not. So this is what we want to call, animal psychism. And we've been told often that the lower psychic powers are not really human, but are animal in nature and are in the nature of a kind of atavism, which we experienced even in the animal state. And sometimes these phenomena are brought forward, and it is assumed that they are spiritual, when in fact they veil the pure air, the clean air and pure light of spiritual consciousness. I think I'll make that little part a little bigger. Okay. The human being has wandered, there it is, wandering in the wilderness. See, that's it. 40 days of wandering in the, quote, wilderness. One is entirely lost there, and that's why we're told to move fleetly through the wilderness. The human being has wandered for ages in the world of illusion, for it is of his own creating. He's wandering, let's say here, wandering amidst his self-created desire forms, giving shape through the imagination to that which is desired, or some reflection of that which is desired on the outer plane, some form, some replica of that which is desired on the outer plane appears through fantasy in this world of illusion. Yet man, in his turn, from the standpoint of consciousness, has contact with both the realities and learns little by little to dissipate the illusion by the steady growth of the radiant light of the soul. And those of you who are working in the Glamour group with us will recognize some of these words as indicating the processes which we use. These words suggest the technique of light. And the word dissipating is applied to glamour, and it is the radiant light of the soul reflected in the reflected on the mental plane with which we work. You remember the triple light, which is brought together into a oneness. The light of matter, it's a vital light, the light of the lower mental plane and the light of the soul. They are joined together to produce that searchlight for the dissipation of glamour. So we are speaking of, when we speak of the great illusion, when we speak of the great illusion, we are speaking of glamour and the need for its dissipation. Elsewhere, we speak about illusion as a mental condition and the need for its dispelling through the intuition. So dissipation, let's just look at that. Dissipation is achieved by using the light of the soul-inspired mind, and dispelling is achieved by applying the intuition. I think, if we can be clear there about a couple of things, then everything will be easier for us as we go along. Trying to look at my chronometer here, I have an ongoing war with my chronometer. Let's see who wins today. Okay. May I pause here to remind you, he says, that duality is only a stage on the evolutionary arc, leading eventually to the realization of unity. Well, that's what we, let's just say, by the time we reach the third degree, this realization of unity should be occurring, and we will be moving towards a realization of oneness, which is more than a realization of unity. The veil of illusion resembles the moment before dawn when the world of familiar things is seen through the fogs and the streamers of mist which veil the world of form and also veil the rising sun. This is an excellent kind of analogy. We need to really come to grips with this question of glamour, because it seems to be that which threatens humanity most at this time, rather than the illusions of the mind. Of course, they can descend into the what we call the sentient sphere or the astral plane, and glamour can be attached to these illusions. He tells us, especially, well, I think it's true for everybody, but especially for the fourth ray type. So let's kind of visualize this as we look at it. The veil of illusion resembles the moment before dawn when the world of familiar things is seen through the fogs and the streamers of mist which veil the world form and also veil the rising sun. So the source which will burn away the illusion is veiled, and also the world of form which is revealed in the light of the sun is veiled as well. We are, in a way, in terms of orientation, we are at sea. This is a blurred and indistinct Neptunian state. Then we have that half-time, that mysterious and vague period when the real is hidden by the unreal. Well, isn't that the state of the consciousness of most human beings? Is this not the state of consciousness of most human beings? That we are spending our thought and our energy and our interest on unrealities which hide from us the true realities. Then we have that halftime as a kind of a twilight, maybe, or maybe it's even more dense than twilight. That mysterious, vague period when the real is hidden by the unreal. Then we have that weird and distorted condition when forms are not seen as they truly are, but lose their shape and color and perspective. We ought to go out one fine morning before dawn when it's fairly moist and see if we can confirm what the Tibetan is saying. I think we've had enough experience in life even to confirm it from memory or in our imagination. But things, in this state, things are not seen as they truly are. True vision is then impossible. The astral stage and the vast cycle of time in which the great illusion holds sway can therefore be judged from the above symbolic approach to be but temporary and transient. Why? Because the Sun of Truth will burn off the fogs of distortion and misrepresentation. As the sun rises, so to speak, or appears to rise, the fogs, the mists, the streamers are dissipated, are evaporated. So it's temporary, but in terms of human evolution, it lasts for a long period of time. Early Atlantean days, he tells us, were about 12 million years ago, and we still have many, many of those with Atlantean consciousness with us even now. In this kind of overlap period, the Aryan root race has begun 1 million years ago or more, depending on how we calculate it, and yet the Atlantean perspective still remains for many. So it is not the stage of a definitely divine manifestation. It is not the stage of pure undimmed awareness. It is not the stage of the perfected work. Okay, all the things that the astral phenomena is not. These list several, a few things which the astral stage is not. We're trying, it's rather difficult to get an idea of the sense in which the astral plane does not exist. Well, once the fogs lift, you have the sun, which symbolizes the soul, and you have the form. As he said, the two realities. But in between, all kinds of distortions, misrepresentations, exaggerations, minimizations, concealment, blurs, lack of color, lack of clarity. That's the moment when you begin to realize the sense in which he means that the astral plane is unreal. Yeah. Okay, it is that period of time wherein the half-gods walk. Half-gods. Interesting term, isn't it? He could have said demi-gods. It is the time wherein truth is only dimly sensed, the vision only vaguely and occasionally seen. It is the stage of the half-realized plan, and when one works on partial knowledge, difficulty and mistakes are bound to supervene. It is also the stage of distortion and of constant mutability, shape-changing, things apparently flowing into each other, very difficult to ascertain the true boundaries of things. They all become confused, fused together, blending into each other. It is the stage of distortion and constant mutability. Whilst it is in evidence, we have the apparently ceaseless pulling hither and thither by forces working blindly and seemingly without purpose. This is really a wonderful somehow description of what of the unreality of the astral plane. As far as humanity is concerned, it is the time wherein man is enveloped in mist and fog and lost in the miasmas arising out of the ground, symbol of the foundational nature of the animal kingdom. Yet at times this stage is seen to be unreal as the dawning light of the spiritual consciousness pierces through the surrounding darkness. It is the interlude between the dominance of the animal consciousness and that of the spiritual. Well, is it the human consciousness? Because the human consciousness is between these two. And this interlude of astral illusion is known only in the human family. There is no astral plane except in the consciousness of the fourth kingdom in nature. For man is under illusion, in a sense different to the conscious awareness of any other kingdom, subhuman or superhuman. Well, you can tell the Tibetans making a great effort here to somehow bring this home to us. It seems so important to study it and get a kind of impression of what he's trying to convey, a transient, bewildering condition that humanity itself is responsible for having created. The imagination, prompted by the subhuman nature, mostly, has created this area of elusive phenomena. Well, okay, we're trying to understand. It is a transitional stage, but however, a very confusing one. Is the confusion necessary, or has the Black Lodge, let me get that, and the ignorance of man combined to create this elusive sphere? Not the matter, but how the matter is combined to mislead. And it really becomes a wilderness in which the human being wanders in confusion. All right, well, I despair in making my meaning clear, he says. And, as we kind of ponder the role of this sphere of phenomenal illusion, phenomenal distortion, we realize that somehow we have wandered in it for millions of years. We don't seem to be capable of escaping into the pure light of mind as illumined by the soul, but now increasingly that can happen. And I suppose when the time comes for us to review our many lives, we will really see the errors we have made because of this misleading phenomenal appearance. I despair in making my meaning clear. How can one who is subject to the illusion of the senses, as are all human creatures, notice how he stands back here, conceive of the state of consciousness of those who have freed themselves from the illusions of the astral plane. Oftentimes that word illusions, it has a more technical meaning in relation to the misapprehensions of the mind, the 7 ways of illusion that we have been studying in the Glamour book. How can a human creature conceive of the state of consciousness of those who have freed themselves from the illusions of the astral plane, or realize the state of awareness of those forms of life which have not yet developed astral consciousness? It's as if, we human beings are in the blinded middle, looking with misunderstanding above and below. It is the dual nature of the mind which causes this illusion, for the mind of man presents to him the keys of the kingdom of heaven, or locks upon him the door of entrance into the spiritual realities. Well, we're told in this regard that the mind is the slayer of the real, and yet the revealer of the real. The mind is both the slayer of the real and the revealer of the real. It is the concretizing, unprincipled mind. Well, Manas is a principle, but it is not directed by the great principles in the higher aspect of our nature when it's said to be unprincipled in this context. And of course, the concrete mind is a great creator of illusion. We see this everywhere in human thought, and we see it so much in the religious sphere. The concretizing of what purport to be spiritual realities. It is the concretizing, unprincipled mind which brings about all the troubles of humanity. What a statement. So we have to teach ourselves and teach others how to think. Okay, and that is building the Antakarana, or reaching into the principle of light, the soul, reaching towards abstraction, building a more flexible mind. But that's an amazing statement. It is the concretizing. I mean, just, look at the news and just see how it's operating. It is the concretizing, unprincipled mind which brings about all the troubles of humanity. I mean, it divides and fragments and leads to war and friction, and creates fragmentation and leads to friction and war and separation. It is the sense of I-ness and the spirit of separative individuality which has brought humanity to its present condition, and yet even that is part of the great developing process. It's as if we have to pass through this difficulty based upon the structure of our apparatus and its process of development from separativeness to unity. That this is really so pointed, isn't it? See, we students of esotericism, we try to get rid of this limiting sense of I-ness, and we try to lift above the lower ego consciousness until we begin to include more and more in our ever more pervasive sense of I, until it is true of us, the old mantra, naught is but me, that greater inclusive I that is called me in this mantra. So it's all part of the developing process, but as long as we think we are the bounded personality, we will forever be dividing and separating and concretizing inappropriately. It is the consciousness of duality and the subjectively realized and synchronously acknowledged sense of I am God and I am form, which has plunged mankind into the great illusion. Now, this is, again, quite a statement. The I am form part of it is common. The I am God is far less common and is an achievement. In this, there's a kind of a catechism which we can look at here. I am the one I God, says the third degree initiate. I am the one I God. And here it is, very important, swept am I by the universal life. And as I sweep upon my onward way, the way of God, I see all lesser energies die out. I am the one, I God. I am the form in which all forms are merged. See, there we have both the types of identification which DK says are responsible for creating the great illusion. I am the soul, the intermediary here, in which all souls are fused. And finally, pure being itself, I am the life, and in that life, all little lives remain. So the oneness has truly been reached and realized. But in this particular case of this kind of formula, a very, very old formula, these realizations are unitive. They are not, they are climactic, they are consummatory, they are the result of a type of consciousness which can include form and God and soul and life. There's no division found here in these final words, but in what we have been studying here, wherever it is, it is the consciousness of duality and the subjectively realized and synchronously acknowledged, and that is at the same time as duality, sense of I am God and I am form, which has plunged mankind into the great illusion. But, whoop, that's going to be a problem. Right. Maybe I can save this before it goes away. But also, to realize that one is both God and form is a high state of unitive realization. So, but earlier, man is torn by the sense of his subjectivity as distinct from the from, well, let's call it from his objectivity and the objectivity of his environment. These two seeming separate. So he is captured by duality. At a certain point, he can put the apparent duality together, and his mind ceases to be dualistic. So, you can see we're dealing with some pretty deep philosophical ideas here, and it's all about how to overcome the false sense of duality. That's really what we're trying to do, and all of our esoteric training, a lot of it anyway, has to do precisely with that kind of achievement. Yet it is this very illusion which renders up to man eventually the secret password into the kingdom of God and brings about his release. So the subject-object dualism is a stage through which we must pass, and it will lead to contemplation and the identification of subject as object. They will be seen as the same, and this will bring the unity of consciousness, and it will bring release into oneness. I am the life, and in that life all little lives remain. One could really ponder on those 8 sentences that were given, or 8 segments. Some of them have maybe more than one sentence in that ancient formula for the third initiation, and it is very, very old, he tells us. It is this Maya itself which serves to guide him into truth and knowledge. In other words, you get tired of your mistakes and you find the way out. Tired of mistaken perception, we find the way out and through into unity and oneness. It is on the plane of the astral that the heresy of separateness has to be overcome. And, well, you would think maybe also in the mind as well. It is on the plane of the astral that the heresy of separateness has to be overcome, and it is on the field of Kurukshetra, that great Atlantean battle, that the individual aspiring Arjuna and the cosmic Arjuna learn the lesson that the knower and the known are one. Sometimes it is said that DK doesn't talk of these things, but, every once in a while he really does. And these are foundational perceptions. And here he is saying them very directly. After we fight it out between the two parts of our so-called family, as in the Mahabharata, we see that in fact they are one thing. We reconcile the dualities, we take the two ends of the stick and we bend them until they meet in the circle of unity. So everything seems so dualistic. Attraction, repulsion, high desire, low desire. The pairs of opposites really are keenly felt on what we call the astral plane. And, there is such a thing as the separative mind too, but let's just say that once the astral plane is brought into a more appreciative or unitive condition, the duality sensed within the lower mind also begins to reduce. We learn the lesson that the knower and the known are one. We have to do this. And we have to do this by learning not just to meditate, concentrate or meditate. We have to learn this by learning to contemplate, because it's there that the unity is appreciated. This is a Libran act. If we put the zodiac to the various stages of the meditative process. The secret science of the master of the wisdom is the secret of how to dissipate the fogs and mist and darkness and gloom which are produced by the union of the fires in the early stages. It's just one pithy sentence after another, isn't it? Do we know how to do this? Well, not the way a master can, but we are learning how to think psychologically. Humanity as a whole is being led into useful psychological thought, which was not possible 2 centuries ago or even a century and a half ago. I mean, the early 20th century began to bring in this type of psychological thinking. How to dissipate the fogs and mists and darkness and gloom. Doesn't sound very appealing, does it? Sounds like reality will not be appreciated in such a state. But the union of the fires in the early stages caused this, and in this question of fire and water lies much problem for the human being. I'm recalling in the opera The Magic Flute, it's a very Masonic opera, and toward the end, the hero Tamino and his soul partner Tamina, they have to undergo the tests of the Egyptian mysteries, and they do that with Tamino is playing the flute. And somehow it brings them through safely, and they go through the test of fire and they go through the test of water, particularly. Because there is where the glamour is produced as those two meet. The steam, is a veiling phenomenon. And also the 3 fires united yield water. We have to see how that might be done. Sounds like kind of an alchemical process, but in the beginning, there are fogs and mists in the early stages. The secret of the master is the discovery that there is no astral plane. He finds that the astral plane is a figment of the imagination and has been created through the uncontrolled use of the creative imagination, which does exist, and the misuse of the magical powers, maybe by man or maybe by the meddling and obstructive counterforce, the Black Lodge, that didn't like the idea that man was succeeding or coming close to succeeding in the initiatory process. And I want to kind of put that in. There is no astral plane. There is matter on the plane of sentiency, but the phenomena into which that matter has been molded by the imagination, those phenomena are just illusions. They endure for a time, and they cause much misleading of the evolving unit. But this idea of a figment of the imagination That's a clear statement, a very clear statement, a figment of the imagination, the wrongly used imagination, because it can be rightly used as well to create the link with the plane of intuition. So the uncontrolled use of the creative imagination, now that's very lunar. Remember when there was that difficulty on the moon chain, as DK describes, and madness of a kind was the result. It was the release of the imagination for purposes which were chaotic and very personal and had nothing to do with what the higher powers intended for the planet. It was a faculty out of control. And that's why we associate madness with the moon, and it's been inherited here on the Earth chain, the uncontrolled use, chaotic creations were the result. And the misuse of the magical powers, well, maybe in Atlantean days, man had some of that, and certainly the powerful magicians who represented the counterforce, they certainly had it, and they could build all kinds of barriers and powerful obstacles for the evolving human unit of consciousness. The work of the hierarchy is primarily to bring to an end the shadows and to dispel the moisture. That is very interesting. Now, you know, it gets us into alchemy to think about moisture. The alchemical process is all about finally about the hierarchical intent and process. Only it was worded in such a way that the inquisitorial powers of the time simply thought that these were fools trying to turn base metals into gold, and the true psychic purpose behind the alchemical quest was not fathomed by the enemy. Now, maybe some did, you know, but at least many alchemists escaped with their life because they were working behind a veil of material symbolism which could not be penetrated, and its spiritual danger to ignorance was not fathomed. The aim of the masters is to let in the light of the soul and to show that spirit and matter are the two realities which constitute the units, and that it is only in time and in space and through the cyclic misuse of the magical and psychic powers, apparently which do exist, that the astral plane of the great illusion has come into being and is now so real or actual a thing that it is, in a certain sense, more real to man than the kingdom of light and the kingdom of form. These are the cleansing and redemptive work of the masters. And if we want to join them, then we will have to learn how to take part in this work too. And the first thing is to clean up our own personal situation and our own glamorous errors, letting in the light of the soul, because the realities here are the light of the soul and the world of form. And in between this area of distortion, I'll read it again. The aim of the masters is to let in the light of the soul and to show that spirit and matter are the two realities which constitute the units, and that is only in time and in space and through the cyclic misuse of the magical and psychic powers that the astral plane of the great illusion has come into being and is now so real a thing. Well, we have to note how the word real is used, apparently real. Now so real a thing that it is, in a certain sense, more real to man than the kingdom of light and the kingdom of form. I guess some of the clearest explanations about the unreality of the astral plane can be found here. So 1 hour has passed in 15.2. Okay, now we continue. In one most interesting sense, it is true that because the human being is a soul, and because the light of the soul is found within him and is gradually growing into fuller radiance, this itself produces the illusion. I guess it's the fire side. Because the human being is a soul, and because the light of the soul is found within him and is gradually growing into fuller radiance, this itself produces the illusion. Because of this illusion, the magical work has been carried forward along wrong lines. I mean, what people want to materialize has become very concrete in the wrong sense, and separative, and out of line with the plan. So it's not wrong to use the powers correctly, but it is wrong to create a whole world of phenomena that do not apply to the goals of the higher powers. Because of this illusion, the magical work has been carried forward along wrong lines. We seek to materialize that which has no value, or actually stands counter to that which has real spiritual value, and has been based on wrong motives and fitted into a scheme which is stronger than the average worker, so it overcomes him, right? For the whole force of the world illusion is against all the efforts of the beginner in white magic. So the light of the soul is part of that which has produced this illusion, but it's been distorted, and that has been desired, which is absolutely valueless or worse. So we really have to learn how to use our inherent cities in a way which will only produce that which is of value spiritually. We have powers. We will cultivate those. We will become adept in their use. But if our consciousness is blind, and we are, brothers of unique blindness, as it is said of the members of the Black Lodge, then those powers will be prostituted to the uses of dense form, and they will be retrogressive. They will have a retrogressive use and create barriers between the hopefully evolving consciousness and the goal of refinement and more subtle consciousness and greater capacity and realization. So what we create can help us or deeply hinder us. And I think a lot of us are involved in still in unconscious creation of form. The throat center, when ruled by the earth, creates all kinds of forms. Saturn brings in a much more disciplined approach when it rules the throat center. The third ray and the imagination are closely related. What we can conceive, we can materialize eventually. The rules, therefore, end with the statement that the magician chants the words that blend the fire and water. But these are the rules for the aspirant. Okay, so a new complication enters here. We learn something new about the rules that we have been given, and we find that in fact there are other rules apparently. The rules for initiates of a paralleling kind end with the words, "Let the initiate sound the note that unifies the fires." Rules for initiates. Well, apparently we haven't, been given those. And even what we have been given is sufficiently abstruse to make it impossible for us to apply these rules immediately in any practical sense. We can learn about them from the academic perspective. Let the initiate sound the note which unifies the fires. Now maybe, let's just see, is there a contrast between blending and unification? This is significant and of much encouragement to the beginner in the magical work. He is still perforce working on the astral plane, and he cannot possibly avoid so doing for much time. The mark of growth for him is the steady withdrawal of his consciousness from that plane and his attainment of mental poise and of mental awareness, followed by the creative work on the mental plane. So this is important. And we can say that growth for the aspirant consists in the following. The mark of growth for him is the steady withdrawal of his consciousness. This is a mental focus and eventual mental polarization from that plane, and his attainment of mental poise and of mental awareness, followed by creative work on the mental plane. There is an interesting and ancient proclamation found in the archives of the adepts, which covers some of the stages in the magical work, couched, of course, in symbolic form. We are fortunate that Master DK can penetrate into this library and bring to us at least that which can be of use to us at our present stage. So let's look at the symbolism of this ancient proclamation. Let's call it ancient magical proclamation. Let the magician stand within the great world sea. Let him immerse himself in water, and there let him stand his ground. Immediately, Saturn is implied. Let him stand his ground. Let him look down into the watery depths, subject to distortion. Nothing, obviously he's breathing the air. He's not swimming in this. He's standing on the earth and he's within the sea, but above him is the air and the fire of the sun, I suppose. Let him look down into the watery depths. Nothing is seen, in form correct. Nothing appears but water. Beneath his feet it moves, around him and above his head. Well, that's a little different than what I just said. It looks like he is engulfed, in fact. Okay, so it appears that the magician is engulfed, above and below, and on every level. But of course, if he stands his ground, what does that mean? Because standing his ground sounds like he's on some kind of terra firma, But let's see, we're going to deal with the elements always when working with the seventh ray and magic. The elements play a big role. Beneath his feet it moves, and above his head he cannot speak, he cannot see. Well, I suppose if he is surrounded by water, he cannot speak, nor see. Truth disappears in water. And this is, the general effect of the astral plane. We just look at the consciousness of the masses which the demagogue can whip up. We look at Germany before World War II. And now we look at the United States, with 30% of the people responding in a most enthusiastic way to demagoguery. Truth disappears in water. Obviously, the demagogues are not speaking to the soul-illumined mind. Let the magician stand within the stream. Maybe this is a little different. There seems to be a reduction. Around him water flows. Aha, okay. Well, there we go. Maybe the word stand is not the best. In the first stanza, let him immerse himself in water and there let him stand his ground. Well, that sounds firm, but the later description shows that under him the water is moving. So he's not really. Is he standing his ground? I wonder in what way. But now he does. Let the magician stand within the stream. Around him water flows. His feet stand firm on land and rock. But all the forms he sees are lost in the gray immensity of mist. It's a very dramatic way of describing the condition of the astral plane. Some people have looked at it as a plane that has great revelation and interest and reality, but to Master DK, it's a bit more like a serpent, and not a good kind of serpent either. The hissing of the concealing serpent, the mist, the fog, a realm of unclarity, really. And he draws it to our attention. He contrasts the supposition that it's a realm of great interest and fascination and enlightenment with what it really is as far as he's concerned. a plane of concealment and unclarity and distortion. So all forms he sees are lost in the gray immensity of mist. At least his feet are standing firm on land and rock, which is more than was stated in the first stanza of this old proclamation. The water is around his neck, but feet on rock and head in air. Okay, well, that's what I thought for the first one. Maybe I was misled by the idea that he stands his ground. Okay, water is around his neck, but feet on rock and head in air he maketh progress. This is the kind of the original language that Master DK was speaking when he began to work with Alice Bailey. Maketh, taketh, breaketh. It's the old, more Elizabethan language. All is distortion still. He knows he stands. So at least he has a basis, and he has some immovable point. He's not entirely at sea. He knows he stands, and we can say that this is Saturn. When you take a stand, Saturn is involved. Where to go? But where to go? And how to go, he knows not nor understands. But at least he has some stand within reality. He begins to know that what swirls around him really is a great illusion. He sounds the words of magic, but muffled, dim and lost, the mist returns to him, so he tries to create, and no true note sounds forth. He tries to create, but maybe worsens the glamour through lack of knowledge of how to create in these circumstances. Around him are the many sounds of the many forms. Now, this takes us back to the catechism, or that formula we just talked about from ancient days. And it's found, where is it found here? Well, it's found in two places, but at least in Dyna 1, it's found here, discipleship and its end. And it's found on page 678. Now, there's one other place where, 678. And also a treatise on white magic. Okay, it looks like we have dealt with this earlier, but it's the same one. Page 386, I suppose, ending with 387. A curious Atlantean chant, which is no longer used, but in those far-off times was chanted by the initiate who took the third initiation, the consummating initiation of that period. It goes as follows. The translation of the symbols in which it was written necessitates the loss of rhythm and potency being brought together as a source of power. Rhythm, Vulcan, first ray, seventh ray. The planets have also rays other than the ones we have been given. Uranus has the first ray and seventh ray. You wouldn't know necessarily that it had the first ray except through some research. The seventh ray is the one emphasized, but the first ray is there. Maybe that's true with Vulcan too. The first ray is emphasized, but in the rhythmic beating out, the hammer blows, the seventh ray is there, it seems to me anyway. Okay, around him are the many sounds, many forms, which swallow up his sound. So the many voices which overwhelm his voice. Okay. And as I said, this has a lot to do with what is presented in this ancient formula, where he says, God's voice rings clear, and in its tones and overtones the little voices of the little forms dim and fade out. I dwell within a world of unity. I know all souls are one. And here's another one just before it, the fifth one. Hark to the joyous paean that I chant. The work is done. My ear is deaf to all the calls of earth. Many voices, right? Except to that small voice of all the hidden souls within the outer forms, for they are as myself, with them I am at one. Small voice, and we hear that the voice of the soul is so often called the still small voice, to which we must attend. I really love this ancient Atlantean chant. I think it's so revelatory. If we are to find out, as DK said, as we noticed, that subject and object are one thing. The knower and the known are one thing. The perceiver and the perception are one thing. And somehow this ancient Atlantean chant reveals that. It's almost like one doesn't want to go through a day under the spell of the illusion of fragmentation. It's almost as if one wants to know all the time that unity prevails, regardless of what the illusion of the senses presents to the consciousness, and that all discrete, apparently discrete things are blended in the unity, and not only that, they are only one thing. In the divine Pimander, it talks about working with the only one thing. May have been a Neoplatonic text. I think it sort of claims to be from Hermes Trismegistus. Is it or is it not? Whatever it is, it has the truth of the all-pervading one as a great principle. Okay, now let's go on. We're in the middle of this, what did he call it? An ancient magical proclamation. We've done 2 verses of it, and we're helping our magician here, who is we ourselves, overcome the glamour. He's getting a foothold now, and he's not drowning. But I might say here, in this case, the magician is in danger of drowning with water above and below, even though he stands his ground. And that of course, to me is the mystery. I don't know how floating in the water with water below and above, I don't know how you stand your ground, but maybe I'll figure it out. Maybe you'll figure it out. So the third verse then, let the magician stand in watery mist, free of the running stream. It's another step, and the glamour has loosened considerably, and the thickness of the water and the distortion caused by water, refraction and all, as you look at objects in the realm of air, they are bent when you see them through water. But now it's a question of perception. The mist, the watery mist, is still veiling reality. The sun has not come out. Let the magician stand in the watery midst. He is standing, free of the running stream. He's free of the sea, then he's free of the running stream. Some outlines dim appear. He sees a little distance on the path. There's improvement here, right? Flickers of light break through the clouds of mist and fog. He hears his voice before it was muffled, right? Before his voice was muffled. Whoop. And his enunciation were unclear. He hears his voice. Its note is clearer and more true. The forms of other pilgrims can be seen. Behind him is the sea. Beneath his feet is seen the stream. He did step out of it. Usually we're making our way to the sea so that we can be like the dewdrop in the shining sea. And I guess that's, is it how the Light of Asia by Sir Edwin Arnold ends? The slipping of the dewdrop into the shining sea. So usually we're headed for the sea, but now the sea is the glamorous watery realm, and we are, instead of a tributary feeding the sea, we are moving from the sea into the tributary, and then we're stepping out on the land. But the air is still pretty thick with fog, with an occasional vision of something truer breaking through the fog. The forms of other pilgrims can be seen. Behind him is the sea, beneath his feet is seen the stream, but he stepped out. Around him mist and fog, above his head no sky is seen, nor sun, although you have the feeling that they are impending and coming. Let the magician stand on higher ground, but in the rain. I guess you can see better in the rain than through a mist or fog. The drops pour down upon him, the thunder breaks, the lightning flashes in the sky, but as the rain pours down, it dissipates the mist. Interesting that not only will the sun dissipate mist and fog, but rain will also. It washes clean the form and clears the atmosphere. So rain is bringing about a process of purification. Things are improving. He has a basis on the land. Light is seen. It certainly wasn't seen in the sea, and it wasn't even seen in the stream. even though there was air above and rock below. But he is becoming, let's say, drier. Although he has to go through this wet stage again in the rain, and it's the first stage of purification. In a way, water precedes fire. But he sees the flashes of lightning in the sky, and we all remember, don't we, what it's like when you're out on a dark night, but there's a thunderstorm, and the bolts of lightning appear, and then suddenly, for a brief moment, the surroundings are illumined. Then when the lightning fades, the surroundings fade as well to our perception. So it could be also the rain purification does not come without grief and tears. I think we know that. Okay, that's 3 steps. Floating in the water, standing in the stream, and that stream is not shallow. Because it reaches to his neck, leaving the head free to contact the air, and the feet to stand upon a rock or the bed of the stream. A submerged rock, of course, a submerged rock. Well, look at your life. Where are we with this? Has it been a long time since we've been swept by such emotion that distortion was inevitable? Have we conquered this stage? So far, it's a pretty Atlantean stage, but there is a clearing beginning to occur. And now the 4th stanza here. Thus forms are seen. Well, I guess it continues. Thus forms are, I guess this is not yet the 4th. This looks like a continuation. Thus forms are seen and sounds are heard, though dim as yet. For loud the thunder roars and heavy is the sound of failing rain. I'll bet it's falling. I'm sort of discovering the errors in the CD-ROM. Well, sometimes the thunder is the symbol of the second ray, but it tells us this thunder tells us that there is a realm of the gods, because without lightning there would be no thunder. So the lightning bolts, the gods, Zeus, Jupiter, lightning comes from the gods, and the roll of the thunder is the evidence. The roll of the thunder is the evidence that the lightning has been released or thrown. And heavy the sound of falling rain. Well, maybe we might say many sorrows lead to purification. in phase one of the purificatory process. But now the sky is seen. I guess this is kind of a transition here, because let's just say that phase three has unreality and growing reality in it. So let's say this is a transitional stanza from unreality in the mist to growing reality in the sun. Transitional. Okay, but now the sky is seen. This is the second part of three, right? The sun breaks forth, and in between the drifting clouds, expanses of the blue of heaven cheer the tired eyes of the disciple, in terms of weather forecasting. This is partly cloudy or partly sunny. Forecasting. Well, maybe this is describing something that is a little bit more like our condition. The sun of the soul is out, the sun of the mind is out. But there are still clouds. Now, maybe this next one is more the fourth stanza. It was easy in the beginning to define the stanzas, but now we're dealing with a sequence of unfolding events. The sun, of course, the light of the soul, all the higher spiritual potencies and the revelatory energies that come from these higher sources. And finally, the sun is the monad, the sun is the planetary logos, the sun is the solar logos, the sun is any great constellation or group of constellations. The sun is a very ubiquitous symbol. It has a lot of use in different ways. Let the magician stand upon the mountaintop. So this is beginning of initiation. Beneath him in the valleys and the plains, water and streams and clouds are seen. All the varying stages of the great illusion, of the great astral illusion. Above him is the blue of heaven without clouds, the radiance of the rising sun. Okay. No, sorry. The radiance of the rising sun, so growing in power as it heads towards high noon. The pureness of the mountain air. That's buddhi in a way. One can breathe. And we have the idea of Gemini and Aquarius related to the ethers and the air of the ethers. In this case, cosmic ethers. Each sound is clear, no longer muffled and distorted, and the silence speaks with sound. This is already a high stage of realization, initiatory. realization. Well, maybe the consummation, maybe this is the fifth. Perhaps we have to think, in terms of the number 5 and the fifth kingdom. Oop, not that. Fifth kingdom in nature. Maybe it's 5 steps. Later, the steps get so kind of complicated, complex, that it's hard to know how many of them we should have. Then comes the highly significant phrases which give the picture of the consummation. Let the magician stand within the sun. Is it the monad? Is it the triad? Is it the soul? Well, soul, triad, monad. Looking from thence upon the ball of earth, all density and objectivity, from that high point of peace, serene. Now, in a way, this suggests Shambhala, the only place of pure and perfect peace upon our planet. Let him sound the words that will create the forms, build worlds and universes, maybe solar systems. Universes is another one of those protean terms. It doesn't always refer to the one vast entirety at any one time, but to different systems. Sometimes galaxies have been called island universes. Build worlds and universes and give his life to that which he has made, because what you create, you have to embody. So this is self-becomingness. Let him project the forms created on the mountaintop in such a way that they can cleave the clouds and which circle round the ball of earth. Somewhere I have a very good image. Tuya uses it quite a bit to show the glamorous condition of our earth. It's the earth surrounded by rather dense gray clouds, you can imagine. So let him project the forms created on the mountaintop. Okay, what are these? These are archetypal forms related to purpose in such a way that they can cleave the clouds which circle round the ball of earth and carry light and power. These shall dispel the veil of forms which hide the true abode of earth from the eye of the beholder. So this is the dispelling of illusion, and the magician is definitely focused Buddhically and beyond. Well, no, I'm not sure how to spell that word, but I'll pretend I know something about it. Okay, such is the magical work, the dispelling of all of the impedimentary conditions, fogs, mists, veils, areas of darkness, they are lifted, and then one sees earth as it is. Let us say one sees the true form, earth as it is, undistorted. It involves the discovery that the astral plane and the astral light, so-called, are but the cinematographs created by man himself. What man has created, he can also destroy, and I guess must, because that's part of the karma. If you've created something that is inhibitory to the process of the divine plan, you have to take care of it. It's your unfinished business. So now what I'm going to do, because I've just been analyzing, I'm going to read it without interruption, though of course I will be tempted to interrupt myself, but I won't. Let's see if I can hold my word here. And on the basis of what I've suggested and what you have thought while these suggestions were going on, then see if the whole of it makes sense to you. Let the magician stand within the great world's sea. Let him immerse himself in water, and there let him stand his ground. Let him look down into the watery depths. Nothing is seen in form correct. Nothing appears but water. Beneath his feet it moves, around him and above his head. He cannot speak. He cannot see. Truth disappears in water. Let the magician stand within the stream. Around him water flows. His feet stand firm on land and rock, but all the forms he sees are lost in the gray immensity of mist. The water is around his neck, but feet on rock and head in air, he maketh progress. All is distortion still. He knows he stands, but where to go and how to go he knows not, nor understands. He sounds the words of magic, but muffled, dim and lost, the mist returns them to him, and no true note sounds forth. Round him are the many sounds of many forms which swallow up his sound. Let the magician stand in watery mist, free of the running stream. Some outlines dim appear. He sees a little distance on the path. Flickers of light break through the clouds of mist and fog. He hears his voice. Its note is clearer and more true. The forms of other pilgrims can be seen. Behind him is the sea. Beneath his feet is seen the stream. Around him mist and fog. Above his head no sky is seen, nor sun. Let the magician stand on higher ground, but in the rain. The drops pour down upon him, the thunder breaks, the lightning flashes in the sky. But as the rain pours down, it dissipates the mist, it washes clean the form, and clears the atmosphere. Thus forms are seen and sounds are heard, though dim as yet, for loud the thunder roars, and heavy is the sound of falling rain. But now the sky is seen, the sun breaks forth, and in between the drifting clouds, expanses of the blue of heaven cheer the tired eyes of the disciple. Let the magician stand upon the mountain top. Beneath him, in the valleys and the plains, water and streams and clouds are seen. Beneath him, in the valleys and the plains, water and streams of clouds are seen. Above him is the blue of heaven, the radiance of the rising sun, the pureness of the mountain air. Each sound is clear. The silence speaks with sound. Let the magician stand within the sun, looking from thence upon the ball of earth. From that high point of peace serene, let him sound forth the words that will create the forms, build worlds and universes, and give his life to that which he has made. Let him project the forms created on the mountaintop in such a way that they can cleave the clouds which circle round the ball of earth and carry light and power. These shall dispel the veil of forms which hide the true abode of earth from the eye of the beholder. Okay, such is the magical work. It's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, I made a few errors as I went along, like to do a dramatic reading there, I realize, but anyway, you get the idea when the continuity is emphasized and we're not breaking up for analysis. More as to the magical work I may not at this time give. It's coming, Will it come with his next revelation? Will it come with the third installment, or will we wait still longer? The words that blend, the fire and water, may not, under any circumstances, be given except under the oath of secrecy which governs automatically the pledged disciple. We're talking about the pledged disciple here, who may be an accepted disciple also. He talks about an initiate pledged, a disciple pledged and accepted, He makes various combinations. These oaths are given to no man, but are rendered by the aspirant to his own soul, when that soul has conveyed to him the words. So it's an internal process, right? And not conferred by the master. The soul sees the readiness when it exists. These oaths are given to no man, but are rendered by the aspirant to his own soul when that soul has conveyed to him the words. It's a reciprocal process. He finds them for himself as the result of tireless effort and endeavor. The words which blend the fire and water. He knows that these formulas are the prerogative of all souls and can only be known and safely used by those who have realized the self as one. So, at least the third initiation. He therefore pledges himself never to reveal these words to anyone who is not functioning as a soul or who is wandering blinded in the veil of illusion. From this automatic response to knowledge by the knowers of the race, the hierarchy of adepts has gathered its personnel. Well, that's going to be that section. And I think, we're almost at a 2-hour point here, so we can, I think, pause. We're up to page 618, and we haven't covered a lot of pages, but they've been very interesting. So from 611 to 618 is how far we have gone, and I will, just trying to gain my bearings. Very hard if one is floating in the sea. You have to at least have your feet on terra firma here. I love this old commentary stanza. It really speaks. So this is the end of part 12. And it is 15:2, and it goes up to from 6:11 to 6:18. Okay, I think we've done 11, right? And then we are going to start part 13, which will be 15:3, and from 6:18 onward, we are making progress, and in the document, we have another 20 pages, and in the book, another 32 pages. It's an amazing treatise, and it gives us the foundation we need to aspire intelligently to become a white magical worker. At least we should not lay up harm for ourselves and others if we follow the recommendations. We cannot become the true white magician possessed of the necessary formulas until we have proven ourselves. And then, as we see, some of these words are not simply conferred by members of the hierarchy, but are self-discovered by the one who has become the soul. At least he realizes his identity is that of the soul. And you have to know, we have to have realized the self as one. He knows that these formulas, I'm going to just copy they're prerogative of all souls and can only be known and safely used by those who have realized the self as one. There is a power that maketh all things new. It lives and moves in those who know the self as one. So we are on our way to the true initiatory status, and it's a exacting path and a painful path at times. He tells us, between the second and third initiation, there's more suffering than at any other time, and maybe it's the most difficult, but we have very good guidance And I'm sure the casual reader of this book, or maybe what can we call it, the frustrated reader of this book, doesn't realize what's really being given. Okay, friends, so that'll be it for the moment, and we'll get on to number 13 as possible. And, I'm trying to complete this before flying to the United States for other processes. We all have different things we do in our life of discipleship. So lots of love, many blessings, and I guess maybe I don't know, has he finished the magical part of his presentation, and now comes exhortation, a call to service. So we'll join at that point. We'll see you then.